Self-confidence is the belief in your abilities as a person. Self-worth is the belief in your value as a person. Self-confidence gives you drive. Self-worth gives you peace.
The banyan tree is a tree unlike others, a representation of resilience and strength through its ability to overcome the status quo and fulfill its purpose.
It knew that it was meant for something bigger and didn't allow the limits of other trees to confine its growth.
And our story looks similar. I'm Leslie.
And I'm Mindy. And our hope is that every one of our listeners learns to take up all the space they were created to, just like the banyan tree. Welcome back to the Banyan Effect podcast. I'm your co-host, Mindy. Last week on the podcast, we talked about finding your authentic self. And we admittedly missed one really big piece of that puzzle. We talked so much about how to step into it and how to recognize when you're on the right path. But one thing that we forgot to talk about is that you cannot become your true authentic self without building your self-worth. And so today we're going to talk about self-worth and how to build it. And we're going to talk also about the difference between self-confidence and self-worth, because those two things I think can really mask each other, but they are very separate, independent things. And we need both, but really we will never become who we are truly created to be authentically without becoming worthy, feeling worthy, knowing that we are worthy. And don't forget to stick around to the very end, because at the very end, we're going to take you through an exercise that we may or may not have stolen from Mel Robbins, the one and only. And we're going to take you through this exercise to help you really start today building that self-worth and actually walking as the person that you want to become.
Before we get started in today's episode, I did just want to take a moment and talk about an ask that we have. Mindy and I are pouring our hearts into this podcast. Like we talked about on some of our first episodes, we went through a period of life that was especially challenging for each of us. And it really tested us down to our core. And what we learned is that we took the call, and we want to continue to take the call. We've gotten so many messages of encouragement and support, and people telling us that the stories that we're sharing are relatable. We believe so strongly that those challenges that we went through were given to us as a gift to grow into who we were meant to be, which is to sit here and share this message with everybody that's listening today. But in order for us to share this message with as many people as possible, we really need your help. So if you are listening today, we have a few asks of you. Subscribe to this podcast. If you listen through Apple Podcasts or Spotify, there is an area to subscribe. That really helps us grow. Another thing that you can do is, if any of these episodes are relatable to you, share them with a friend or a family member. The third thing that you can do is follow us on Instagram. So we have an Instagram account. We really want to grow it there. We're pretty tiny over there right now, and we need your help growing that as well. So thank you for being here and helping us live out our purpose, which is sharing this message through this podcast.
So let's get started defining these differences between self-worth and self-confidence, because it was not until just recently that I really gave that thought and realized, wow, those two things are really different. I have always considered myself very self-confident. And again, it wasn't until recently that you and I attended this live virtual conference, and they talked about being worthy. And that's when I realized that they're not the same, and they mimic each other. I think that if somebody asked a really highly self-confident person if they had a lot of self-worth, it would be easy to say yes. But in all reality, you can be a very self-confident person without having self-worth. self-worth. And I was thinking about this earlier today, and I had this like visual. I'm like, I just want to paint a picture for people. Okay. So bear with me.
Yeah, I would love to see
Leslie's
this
like, oh
painted
gosh,
picture.
where are we going? I was thinking of, okay. So here it is. I was thinking about an egg, right? Like you can have a hard-boiled egg and non-hard-boiled egg, just a regular old egg, sitting right next to each other, right? And they look exactly the same. And they've got a hard shell. They're protected. They can roll around on the counter and, probably not crack because they've got that tough outer shell. However, if you drop them both on the floor from counter height, one will like bounce, right? And one will explode all over and leave its messy, sticky self all over your beautiful cabinetry and flooring. And that, I think, is a perfect visual, an example of how this can look. Like what it looks like on the outside does not equal what's on the inside. And I will also say that I have been this self-confident person my whole life, and it wasn't until 6 months ago, 8 months ago, something like that, if that even, I don't know, maybe only 6 months ago, that I would say that I started becoming somebody who I would define as having self-worth.
Yeah, I agree. Listening, well, one, the egg analogy, I can't believe you didn't share that with me earlier when we were planning this podcast. You really left that for a surprise today.
I was thinking about it during acupuncture. And that's why I don't know. Acupuncture is good for lots of things, apparently, coming up with.
But it's perfect because it's so true. So the conference that we were at this weekend, it was one of those conferences. Same thing. I have always been a self-confident person, and I think other people would think about me similarly. But this conference was one of those when they started going through the differences of self-confidence and self-worth. I was writing down notes so frantically that I had to stop taking notes and switch to my computer so I could type because it was so eye-opening. I was left almost speechless. Those moments when you're sitting at a conference and you're like, yes, oh my gosh, yes, that makes so much sense. I felt like every moment was that because this piece of self-confidence, it's like that hard shell, it's like what you show on the outside. You believe you're driven. That hard shell can protect you through all of that. So you're driven, you achieve a lot, but deep down inside, you're fragile. So you're looking for external validation to keep being driven. You're striving for other people's or leaning into other people's opinions of the stuff that you're doing so you can keep being driven. And it was really eye-opening to recognize that you can be a driven person and you can be a person that achieves a lot. You can have both of those things and still be somebody without self-worth. That was really wild to hear other people sharing.
Yeah. And I think the biggest takeaway that we both, I think that we both, we knew what self-worth was because we've had a shift inside of ourselves, but nobody had taught us or defined it for us before. But I think that since then, when you and I have been talking about it, the thing that we both feel like is this big aha around this topic is that you're not looking for external opinions or validation when your self-worth is really strong and high. So yes, we both really want to do a great job at work and for our clients, but for me, for my clients, for you, for your customers or your team that you're leading, things like that. But if I when I go into my work life every single day, it looks a lot different because I now know that I am doing my very best. I'm not saying I'm perfect, but I'm doing my best and I am operating from a place of service and I care deeply about my team and my clients. And so if somebody doesn't agree with something I say or the way that I handled something, it can kind of bounce off of me because my self-worth isn't based on what they think about me or what their opinion of the job that I did is. It's based on my opinions and my thoughts about the type of work that I am representing. And when you can get to a place where you are living each day from a place of what feels right to you. I talked last week about that closing gift. And that is such a perfect, I was so excited to give that gift because I felt good about it. The clients, I feel like were kind of honestly like, oh, that's cool. But I didn't care. I was so excited about it because it felt, I didn't care. I didn't need their validation. I didn't need them to tell me like, wow, that was the best closing gift you ever could have come up with. Because I knew that it was an authentic thing for me to give, if that makes sense. So that is the difference between self-confidence. Like a self-confident person would go in and be like, here, I made you this. And then self-worth would be dependent upon the feedback.
They talked about this on the conference as well. It's like when you can recognize. So one of the examples that was given was like, we look at Beyonce's strengths, and obviously it's singing and dancing, and we don't have those strengths. And so there's really obvious strengths in some people, but then there's more unconventional and not so obvious strengths in others. And so what the message was when you can start to recognize your strengths for what they are, you shift your thinking from belief in your ability to belief in the value that you bring. So not so much like, yeah, I can do that. I can drive. I can accomplish that. But when I can start to recognize my strengths, which I know for a long time I really struggled with because they're a bit unconventional. It's not like she's a great speaker, she's a great writer or a singer or whatever. My strengths are unconventional. And so it was harder to see the value that I could bring into certain situations. Believing in your value is very much a self-worth quality.
The virtual conference that we attended over the weekend was put on by Jamie Kern Lima. She wrote the book and just launched it called Worthy. And one of the things that she read through was in her book, she went through and defined self-confidence and self-worth. And I think that's probably just the easiest way for us to help you all kind of wrap your head around it. So I'm just going to zip through some of them that she mentions in her book. So self-confidence is what you show on the outside. Self-worth is what you feel on the inside. Self-confidence is based on mastery. Self-worth is based on identity. Self-confidence is what you can do. Self-worth is who you are. Self-confidence is believing you're skilled enough. Self-worth is believing you are enough. Self-confidence fluctuates based on your environment. Self-worth is stable through every environment. Self-confidence is fragile. Self-worth is foundational. Self-confidence is the belief in your abilities as a person. Self-worth is the belief in your value as a person. Self-confidence is I'm striving to earn love. Self-worth is knowing I am love. Self-confidence gives you drive. Self-worth gives you peace.
So good.
So good.
One of those that really stands out to me is self-confidence and how it fluctuates in different environments. And I think about some of the times where I have said out loud that I feel like a chameleon, where depending on the friends that I am with, I will shift what I like or what I do or how I behave because my self-worth and self-identity wasn't strong enough to stay foundational through that. And I think what's shifted a lot in the last 6 months since really leaning into and finding my own self-worth is I feel so much more stable going into different situations. So whether it's at work or with friends or with my family, I don't feel like I'm living that split personality or double life, depending on where I am. And I don't think before this conference, I ever recognized that that was a self-worth issue. I thought that it was totally normal to have the confidence to show up however I needed to show up at different places, but really that was low self-worth being disguised as high self-confidence.
Yeah, I think that's the whole thing, right? Is that it disguises. And so that was just so monumental for me, is to realize like, whoa, I've always thought that I had self-worth. And really, I was happy to feel like I think that I'm doing well in that area now. But I look back 6 or 7 months ago and I realized I wasn't. The one that stuck out for me is I'm striving to earn love, and self-worth is I am love. And that's exactly what I went through with the situation with my dad. You know, when I sat down with that therapist and said, how did I get in this situation? That's how I got in that situation. I was striving to earn his love and his, everything, like his admiration, his trust, everything. I was striving so hard to earn that and over functioning my whole entire life to do that. And it blew up, where now I'm not striving for anybody's love anymore.
It's really a transformational idea when you start to recognize high self-confidence people and the possibility that they actually are disguising unintentionally really low self-worth. I mean, when you look at all of those qualities, the belief in your ability, the turning to external validation, striving to earn the acceptance or appreciation or love from other people, they achieve, their skills are usually really solid. I mean, you look at those people and you really admire them, thinking like, wow, they really have it put together. But really, it could be disguising really low self-worth. And I think that's a really transformational idea to think about in your everyday life as you build relationships with people and you work with people and you compare yourself to others.
Okay. Hey, bestie. Do you want to be part of something fun we're working on? We're excited to announce the upcoming release of a new book that will redefine the way we build and live in our homes.
This book will not only change the way we build homes, but also be a beautiful and inspirational book to help you better build, design, and live in your own home.
Here's what we need you to do. We need photos. Do you have a unique or inspiring story behind your home? A room that dreams are made out of? Maybe a space that has a historical charm or a modern design, or even a cozy space that makes it truly exceptional?
If you're proud of your home and you want it to be featured in our upcoming book, then we want to hear from you. Share your stories and your photos with us at info@thebanyaneffectpodcast.com or fill out our contact form on our website at www.thebanyaneffectpodcast.com.
We always tiptoe around this topic of overfunctioning in our podcasts, and overfunctioning is one of those life-changing things that I have found through therapy and just self-discovery. And I feel like I have had this epiphany that it is the root of overfunctioning is low self-worth. And once I realized that I was becoming this person who was just overfunctioning, because that's what it is. It's not believing that you are enough. It's believing the idea of having to master something, right? Like I can't, let's use real estate, for example. I can't go out and do a listing appointment unless I have this and I know that and I have all of these things, right? You know, I talk to brand new real estate agents all the time, and they're so filled with fear because they don't think that they can do a good job because they don't have experience, because they're basing it on trying to build their self-confidence rather than knowing that their self-worth is they're going to go and they're going to work their butt off, and they may not know everything, but that's okay. They have integrity and they have good work ethic. And, you know, all of those things are the qualities that we build when we have a high self-worth around ourselves. They go hand in hand, right? And so I think that if you are somebody who can relate to that idea of overfunctioning, and that yes, I am an overfunctioner. I would suggest maybe looking into your worth, because I know for me, that was a very pivotal point in my life last year when I realized that I was over functioning and I wanted to stop because I had to stop because of my health. Like I was over functioning myself to death, literally. Take it from a recovering over functioner. You can overfunction your way into or out of a lot of situations and a lot of things. But ultimately, if you don't have self-worth, overfunctioning is only going to take you so far. And so if you are feeling like I'm stuck, like there's a purpose and I can't find it, all these things that we've talked about from day one on this podcast, it comes down to your self-worth.
I feel like that statement needs to be said again. Like it's so powerful. Like really stop and think. Your self-worth is your ceiling. We've talked about like starting an exercise routine and self-sabotaging yourself off of it, or trying to grow in a career and self-sabotaging your way into something else, or self-sabotaging your parenting. You're in a good streak and all of a sudden you flip or you stop doing something that's working. If you really think about, like, you hit your ceiling because your self-worth wasn't low enough. Like you couldn't go further down that path. You couldn't grow that banyan root stronger because your core wasn't big enough. It wasn't foundational enough. So I think about all of those starts and stops and frustrations of feeling like I'm stuck or that something is missing. All of those things that we've talked about, it's truly coming from a place of not having enough self-worth. I had reached the ceiling because my self-worth wasn't high enough. As soon as I went back and looked at my self-worth and did the work of some of those things that we talked about, I am love, believing in my value versus my ability, believing that I'm enough versus looking to external validation. All of a sudden, all of these other branches and roots are growing and fast. And it's like there are no barriers anymore. And that is truly because the focus went away from self-confidence and that constant desire to drive and achieve more and more and more. And okay, what's next? And instead went back to the core of self-worth. And then it's like all of those other things started to become easier.
Yeah, I think many, many, many women, if not all women, can relate to self-sabotaging themselves back to a weight that they weren't happy with, or getting, falling off the wagon of a exercise routine. For me, one way that I know that I'm finding my self-worth and that I've found it and I've been able to start growing it is that when I consistently make decisions that I'm proud of for a long period of time. So a month, 2 months, 3 months, I consistently make the same decisions, even though some of them are hard. When I quit drinking alcohol, there have been many times where I'm like, I just want, it's Friday. Like, I just want to have a glass of wine, or I just want to whatever. But I know that I'm going to regret it. And I know that that's not what my body needs right now. And so I know that I am worth saying that hard no, right? It's just like you would do your, tough love to your kid. Like, what's best for your kid. You're going to do the hard thing when you know it's what your child absolutely needs. Self-worth looks like doing that for yourself. And the other thing, like with my health, that I had to really wrap my head around and kind of pull up my bootstraps, so to speak, and just kind of figure it out, is that I decided that I am worth looking back at my life with no regrets. And I had to have a very serious conversation with myself when I decided to take my kidney health into my own hands and fire all the doctors that I had been working with. And I decided I am worth giving this my all. And that looks like very consistent, very repetitious decisions that I might not feel like making every day. but I'm worth it. My body, my health, my family, we are all worth it. And I am going to keep doing it because ultimately I remember this moment in time where I am like, I absolutely cannot look back at my life and realize that drinking alcohol was more important in my life than giving it everything that I have inside of my being to heal my own body and to heal my kidneys. And that is self-worth. That is choosing you and making a decision that you are going to choose you and you're going to choose you over and over and over again because you are
And
worth it.
One of the greatest things that I feel like we've both discovered as a result of that is it's so freeing. It's so freeing to be authentic and to feel deep down in your core that you are worth it. And now I sit here today and I ask myself, why was I so afraid to be myself? Why was I so afraid to really dig in to that little tiny fire that was happening deep down in my belly that was telling me that I was made for something more? I was so scared to address it that I just ignored it. And now, 6 months later, look at both of us. It is absolutely freeing. And those fears have just, you realize that they were all lies. Okay. So at the beginning of this episode, we promised an exercise. And this is one, when Mindy and I were listening to this exercise, we were actually in the car on the way home from the grocery store. And I had to tell Mindy to keep her eyes open and keep her eyes on the road so we didn't get in a car accident. But the exercise that we want to walk you through today is about specifically finding your self-worth. And again, we have to give a shout out to Mel Robbins, who we absolutely stole this idea from, but it was so impactful. I immediately went home and bought a notebook so I could start to document it myself. But it's all about finding the specifics of your self-worth. So one of the questions that she asked was, when I feel worthy, what do I look like? And what she meant by this was, think about yourself 1 year from now, not 10 years from now, 1 year from now, and you are feeling whole and worthy in your life. The self-worth traits that we talked about earlier exist in your everyday. What do you look like? From the moment that you get up in the morning to the moment that you go to bed, what are you doing? What are the activities that you're doing throughout the day?
I actually did this exercise a few years back when I was struggling with some imposter syndrome, which I think is obviously related to your self-worth. And it was when we were in the beginning stages of seeing if we could build our dream home. And I was kind of riddled with fear because of the leap of faith that I felt like it was. You know, both my husband and I are business owners, so it's scary to just assume that you're going to be able to afford the same things forever kind of thing. And I remember feeling like, what if I'm not enough? What if I'm not worthy of this home or the mortgage it's going to cost or whatever it was? And I started doing a similar exercise. I would ask myself, well, what does she do? Like, what does the woman that lives in that house that you're designing in your head, what are her hobbies? What are her habits? What time does she go to bed? What time does she wake up in the morning? What does she do first thing in the morning? What does she do for exercise every day? How does she treat her kids? What's the relationship that she has with her kids? Who are her closest friends? Like, what does her social life look like? What's her marriage look like? What does she wear? What does she eat? And I just got really curious and I started almost dreaming up this woman that I wanted to be like. I want to be like this woman that I'm like making up in my head. And so what I started to do, which is what we hope you will start to do, is I just started doing those things. Like, well, if she wakes up at that time of day, I can start waking up at that time of day. If that's how she spends her mornings, well, I wonder if I can rearrange my schedule so that I can spend my mornings like that. And I just every single day I started doing the things that I thought that this worthy woman did. And I guess it could be a little bit maybe fake it till you make it. But it worked. It helped me realize who I wanted to be. And again, we always talk about being curious. It got me really curious as to like who I wanted to be. And then as you start approaching this self-discovery and stepping into this more authentic self, it all starts to come together, and you start listening to your intuition. You start listening to that gut feeling like, yep, that feels good, or nope, that didn't go well. And you just keep going in this direction. And next thing you know, like we talked about last week, all of a sudden you're like, wow, I'm really happy. And it's because you've been stepping into this authentic self, and you've been believing that you are worthy of treating yourself this way and acting out this way and living out this life that you actually want. And as long as you keep, again, like I said with my health journey, as long as you keep consistently making decisions that at the end of your day you're proud of, you will end up happy. You will end up serving in your purpose in life. But you have to keep going. This doesn't happen overnight. And this is a practice. And the reason I think that she only goes 1 year out is because we never know. I don't know who I'm even going to want to be in 5 years, let alone plan for that person. 1 year is much more manageable to think about.
So grab yourself a notebook and answer those questions that we just outlined. Document them. When you get up in the morning, what are you doing? When you get ready for work in the morning, what are you doing? When you greet yourself in the mirror for the first time, how do you do it? What's the first thing you notice when you get up in the morning? Answer those questions and start doing them. Like Mindy just said, just start doing them consistently. And all of a sudden, you wake up one day and you have self-worth.
Okay, we're going to leave you today with one more quote that we heard from the conference that we virtually attended. And it's that lack of clarity will destroy you. And that sounds really bad, but I think it's important to think about as you are creating this worthy version of yourself and you're picturing what he or she looks like and you are drawing up this person, you have to be really clear. So we're going to leave you with that. That lack of clarity will destroy you. Get really, really clear about who you want to become 1 year from now and start today stepping into that version of you. We hope you have enjoyed today's episode and found some valuable insights. If you liked what you heard, we'd love it if you would hit the subscribe button.
We love hearing from our listeners, so drop us a comment, share your thoughts on social, or review wherever you listen to podcasts. Your feedback keeps us going and helps us bring you the content you want to hear.
As always, we appreciate your time and company. Until next time, stay curious, stay inspired, and keep listening to the Banyan Effect podcast.